The Buffett rule is alive and kicking in the State of the Union. Will soaking the rich bring prosperity to the Republic? I'm Alan Barton. Stand by for the front page.
When it comes to the deficit, we've already agreed to more than $2 trillion in cuts and savings. But we need to do more. And that means making choices. Right now, we're poised to spend nearly $1 trillion more on what was supposed to be a temporary tax break for the wealthiest 2% of Americans. Right now, because of loopholes and shelters in the tax code, a quarter of all millionaires pay lower tax rates than millions of middle-class households. Right now, Warren Buffett pays a lower tax rate than his secretary.
Ugh. Joining me in studio, Elan Journo, fellow at the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights, and Terry Jones, associate editor for Investors Business Daily. And let me start by ranting. Shame on you, Miss Warren Buffett's secretary, for accepting that invitation to sit up there with the first family, which is like where 9/11 families have sat, and survivors of horrible things in history, and heroes have jumped into the icy Potomac to save people from a plane crash, and you were invited because someone else's tax rate is unfair. Yours is fine. And you accept that invitation, ma'am? Shame on you. Shame on you. All right, this is just making me blankety blank 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 mad. Terry, what is your reaction? This Buffett rule, this theater, this woman sitting up there who has done nothing, and she isn't even the one with the wrong tax rate. Yeah. He wants other people's tax rate to be her tax rate. And now the word is that she makes a lot of money. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Stop me from talking. I'll keep going.
She paid somewhere around a 35% tax rate. Now,
we don't know whether that's combined. We don't know whether that includes state, federal, local, FICA. We don't know what.
I have no idea. But the fact of the matter is you cannot pay that much in taxes unless you have an awful lot of income. And Forbes magazine figured it was somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000 a year. That puts her solidly in the 1%, okay? Yeah. So, you know, this notion that she's a secretary, that's a rather sexist term. She is not a secretary. She's an administrative assistant, rather different in a corporate.
To a billionaire.
To a billionaire.
Hey, Mr. Buffett, if you've got a problem with your poor administrative assistant and her financial condition, I think you're in a position to handle that situation.
Yeah. But what's worse about this is that it takes an anecdote such as this and uses it as an emblem for what Obama said was millions of middle-class Americans pay more in taxes than millionaires like Warren Buffett. That is a lie. And in fact, Treasury Secretary Geithner was asked to provide evidence for that remark, could not do so. It's a lie. It's an out-and-out lie. The fact of the matter is, people who earn $1 million or over pay an average tax rate of about 24%. People in the 50 to 100,000 range, which is by any meaningful definition, middle class, pay about 9% in taxes. That is the reality. More than twice as much. The wealthy top 1% pay 36% of all taxes. The bottom 50% pay nothing or get money back. It's all based on lies.
All right, Elan, jump in here. What do you think of this Buffett rule just demagoguery? It just makes me sick.
I think you have to take it seriously that this is a lie. This is a big lie. And he's hoping that people won't take it seriously, that he would stand there in front of us and lie his way through this speech. When you have a system that's so progressive as this one is, and the data you just provided, I think, just sketches it out, you have to wonder, why would he go after the wealthy, many of whom are the most productive people we have? And I think this reveals some of his animus to success and the deeply anti-American ethos that he embodies. He really does not respect the Steve Jobses of the world. And he does not respect the accomplishments that they have brought into the world. And why else would you go after them when you know full well, and his staff knows full well, that they are the ones who are paying the most? So where does this lead? It leads to the desire to destroy them, to cut down the tallest poppies.
And to invite that secretary or the administrative assistant to sit next to your wife, which is sort of a hallowed position in that place since Reagan, I think, did it first, with that guy who jumped in the Potomac. A guy who jumped into the icy Potomac to save lives, and now we've gone to Warren Buffett's wealthy administrative assistant and her tax rate.
She's a tax victim.
Earns her, yeah, she's a tax victim. Now that wins the seat next to the First Lady. All right, let's listen to more of the president. He continued with this.
When Americans talk about folks like me paying my fair share of taxes, it's not because they envy the rich. It's because they understand that when I get a tax break I don't need and the country can't afford, it either adds to the deficit or somebody else has to make up the difference, like a senior on a fixed income, or a student trying to get through school, or a family trying to make ends meet. That's not right.
And that issue, you know, I'll give him consistency. Back in 2008, they said, you know, if you raise capital gains tax rates, you know, you get less money. Less money goes into the Treasury when you raise the capital gains tax rate. What do you think? He goes, well, we do it anyway because it's more fair. And so this trope about, well, that's just not right. That's just not right. But it's like economic childishness. And this is the President of the United States, complete with their little graphs that they run. This is the White House version of their speech, by the way, on the web, where they add their little stupid graphs to make their point. Anything you want to say? I mean, let's talk about the Buffett rule, first of all, and whether it would even be effective. His idea is that millionaires should pay a minimum 30% tax. It doesn't matter if you earn that money from capital gains, from whatever. If you have money coming in at $1 million or more, you pay 30%. What do you think of that?
It's a terrible idea. Look, we already have a minimum tax in this country. I mean, and by the way, so do corporations have a minimum tax. They pay a minimum tax because people like him insisted on it. But you know what's worse about this is he said something there in those remarks, you know, where he said, whether it's words to the effect of whether I need this tax break or not. Well, that's not the question. That implies that government is the one that determines what you need and what you don't need. It is your money. You have earned it. Government must make a strong case for taking your money before it takes it, or it's an immoral taking.
And when you go to most polls, when you go to the American people and say, like, how much should the government combined be allowed to take out of your paycheck, most normal Americans say 30%, 35%, and they're talking about combined federal, state, local. And no one ever seems to really chase that down and say, oh, really? You know, like, even when you ask administration officials, how much, what's the rate? What's the rate combined? They're all like, well, you know, I think 30% federal. Anyway, so, and they move on, and they don't realize that there are people, particularly in like the $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 earning range, where you don't have a lot of cap gains. They're paying 50%. 50%. They get caught in AMT. Elan, I'll bring you in here to talk a little bit about AMT, because they already tried this way back when they developed the alternative minimum tax to go after the 150 people in the country who weren't paying their fair share. Those 150 used their tax lawyers to dodge it. And now what does AMT get? Millions of people.
It gets millions
including
of people,
me.
Because it's never indexed for inflation. So it's the middle class.
Killed by AMT every year. Elan, go ahead.
And the reality is that even if you had the wealthiest people and you took all their money, you still couldn't dig us out of this hole.
Yeah, I was listening to Rush Limbaugh said something like, I guess the top 8,000 earners in this country earn what? 120 billion, 200 billion or whatever total. You could just confiscate that, pay for the government for about 8 weeks.
And it's a ruse, because the real issue is, why are we in this hole? And that is the massive spending on entitlements program, predominantly on the entitlement program, that there's no plan on the table to retract that and scale it down and ease that burden.
All right. Well, one of the great capitalists of the recent era, Bill Gates, finally led some sanity. He lent his voice to the president's request, and let's take a look at how he rebutted the president.
Well, the United States has a huge budget deficit, so taxes are going to have to go up. And I certainly agree they should go up more on the rich than everyone else. That's just justice. I hope we could solve that deficit problem with a sense of shared sacrifice, where everybody would feel like they're doing their part. And right now, you know, I don't feel like people like myself are paying as much as we should.
Oops, he didn't rebut it, did he? He spoke all the code words. Shared sacrifice. You know, someone like me, I don't think I'm paying as much as I should. Well, Mr. $50 billion or whatever he's worth, write a check. Go ahead, write a check. All you guys can just volunteer, start a movement, a billionaires movement to start checks, to write checks to the Treasury and help out. What is this thing that he has to get everyone else in on it, since everyone else's tax rates aren't going to lend that much income?
Well, he's bought into the progressive view that progressive taxation, as they call it, which is not, you know, kind of a misnomer, is somehow the desired end result of the tax code, and that the more the wealthy pay, the better, because of course there must be something wrong with them if they are wealthy. Clearly they've gotten their money through you know, nasty means if they have all that cash.
I wonder if people like Gates and Buffett are just sort of speaking code to get media adulation. You know, you're supposed to act, maybe you can speak to this, Elan. You know, you're supposed to act guilty if you've been tremendously successful. Thankfully, Romney, at least this week, finally said, I don't apologize for the success I've gotten. He's worth 1,000th of what Gates is worth, or Buffett. But talk to me a little bit about the guilt that seems to be endemic in those who have become successful, and it becomes almost a part of their PR regime to be like, well, I don't pay enough, and shared sacrifice, and oh my, oh my.
It's tragic, because if they really, I mean, and I think a lot of them do feel guilty and sincere, and I don't doubt Bill Gates' motives here. I think he really does believe he needs to pay more because he succeeded. Now, I think that's completely inverted morally. I mean, if he really believed that and implemented that rule in his company, he would drive out the best people, and he would, so paying them the least and paying the least competent and least successful people the most, well, what does that do? It really penalizes success.
Yeah. Yep, last word.
Yeah, envy and guilt are bad ways to have a tax policy. And, you know, the only tax policy that's truly fair is taxing everybody the same. It's always been my argument that the income tax as it exists, progressive, is a violation of due process under the law, because it treats different people differently under the law, and I just think that's wrong.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. For Elan and Terry, I'm Alan Barton, and you have been watching Front Page.